Paranoia is in boom. The PR transmissions will resume. They'll try to push drugs to keep us all dumbed down and hope that they will never see the truth around. Another promise, another scene, another package lie to keep us trapped in greed. Another green bells wrapped around our minds, an endless red tape to keep the truth confined. They will not force us. They will stop degrading us. They will not control us. We will be victorious.
Hello, everybody. I am bringing in my incredible two guests. I'm super excited about tonight. Both of these gentlemen are amazing, and they are both part of an organization that I learned about from a gentleman named Brad Wolf, who you saw on my show with some other members of Merchants of Death, which is not a metal band. And they've been doing some incredible work. So tonight I have the honor of having Mr. Baraka and Matthew Ho, who's been on several times, who you guys are familiar with. Thank you so, so much, gentlemen, for joining, especially at this time when this discussion is more imperative than ever. So thank you so much. Mr. Baraka, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Well, first, let me say thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate a chance to dialogue with you and your audience. What you're doing is very, very important, because bringing alternative information and analysis is exactly what we have to do at this critical moment in history. My name is Ajamu Baraka. I am I guess they refer to me as a long time activist, or long-term. I've been involved in this struggle for social justice and human rights for more than 50 years. Currently, I am the chair of the coordinating committee of the Black Alliance for Peace. I also work with the U.S. Peace Council and on the leadership body of the United National Anti-War Coalition. So the main thrust of my work is the struggle for peace, opposed to imperialism, and all of the various structures of oppression. I also work with various other formations, including the Green Party, which I had an opportunity to support the candidacy of one of your guests, Matthew Ho, in North Carolina, and that was a very interesting experience with the kinds of efforts that were made to try to undermine his candidacy. But again, it's just another example of what we're up against for those of us who believe in the possibility of a real, authentic democracy and the protection and expansion of human rights.
Absolutely. Matt.
Yeah, thank you for having me back on. I think this is my second time with you. Maybe
I think it's your third.
Third, okay. But no, I appreciate being back on with you, and a pleasure to be joining with Ajamu and everyone watching. And yeah, I'm Matt Ho. I am with an organization called the Eisenhower Media Network, We're a collection of former military, intelligence officials, FBI agents. We have a whole different cast of characters, but all of us who've had the experience and who recognize the dangers, the destruction, the insanity of American militarism. And so we try to present an alternative perspective to that. I'm also a member of Veterans for Peace, as well as, excuse me, a number of other organizations like World Beyond War. I want to second what was just said about alternative media, in the sense of how important it is. And this dissidence that we see from the American people towards wars is something that I think has a lot to do with the availability of information, of people seeing background context, that can come from whether it's commentary or whether it's on the ground reporting in a way that they haven't seen before, and also too via a narrative that is not a government narrative or a corporate narrative. And so I think where in the past, if you go back and say you look at American wars, for the beginning of those wars, oftentimes for several years, the American public was supportive of the war. And then after years, when the weight of the wars is you can no longer ignore it. It can no longer be hidden. It is so apparent. The weight caused by the failures of the wars, the costs of the wars, the atrocities of the wars, the moral horror of the wars, the lies of the wars don't make sense anymore, etc. You see public opinion swing. But what we've seen, I think, especially in the last decade, is an American public that increasingly is not giving the benefit of the doubt to American wars. So you look at, say, the intervention, the U.S. NATO intervention in Libya, the American involvement in Syria. You look at then, say, the Ukraine war or the current ethnic cleansing and going on in Palestine, especially in Gaza, and you see an American public where the White House, the Congress, the Pentagon can't count on a sizable majority of Americans to just give them the benefit of the doubt up front. Right. And I think that has a lot to do. Americans are not trusting these wars. They're not giving that benefit of the doubt that, yes, going and sending our young men and women overseas to kill and be killed is a good thing. That's no longer there. And I think that has a lot to do with programs like yours that educate people and give people a perspective as well as facts that they're not getting from a government narrative or from corporate media.
Thank you. I totally agree. Independent media is, well, we're seeing, we're absolutely seeing that with the number of journalists who are being killed, and Al Jazeera even now being held and tortured and killed. That's definitely, journalists are a threat. Mr. Baraka, having been in this fight for over 50 years, what is different about what we're seeing in Palestine? Or is it comparable to things just on a greater scale? Or how does this affect you compared to other wars you've been fighting against?
Well, one thing that's very different about this conflict is the way it's been covered. One of the reasons why we have not had significant sustained opposition to the colonial project in Palestine was that there was very little coverage of the realities of life for occupied Palestinians. When I went to Palestine in 2014, when I came back, one of the things that I said was that if the U.S. public was exposed to the realities that we witnessed in Palestine, support for Israel would dry up in a day. what we have seen with this conflict is that unlike the other invasions into Gaza, this one was well covered. The intent, I think, of the mass media at first was that they were going to cover this uh, retaliation from the Israeli state in response to the attack on October the 7th, and that the images that they were going to uh, circulate was going to result in for more support for the Israeli state. I'm going to have to plug in my computer. I'm so sorry. It'll take 1 second.
Sure. You know, Matt, one of the things that we're hearing about every time I post something about Palestine, I hear about the 130 hostages. Now, we know that there are thousands of, including children, who have become political prisoners in Israel. Let's just say, even though Netanyahu has declined to negotiate to release the 130 hostages who are still being held in Gaza. Let's say, and I don't like to do whataboutism, but let's say they are released. Do you think everything going on now stops?
No, absolutely not. And Netanyahu said that in the last day or two. He was actually asked whether or not Israel would win, and his response was to ignore that and just say that we're not going to stop. Whatever happens, we're not going to stop. And we actually saw today Isaac Herzog, the president of Israel, say that Israel is interested in pursuing another ceasefire and another hostage exchange. And even late this afternoon, there were reports coming out of Qatar relating to some of the details possibly of that exchange. So as well as with a ceasefire. And then, of course, there is the ceasefire resolution that's going through the UN Security Council that's been delayed now. They were supposed to vote on that 2 days ago or Monday, and they've delayed it twice, possibly attempt to get an American abstention on the vote so the thing will actually go through. If there's an American abstention, of course, it means this thing's going to be so watered down that it's almost meaningless. But it shows that the Americans are at least willing to abstain at this point, which just, again, but shows how isolated the Americans are, how our policies have put us where we are a rogue state, a pariah state. But I wanted to follow up on something Ajamu said about being in Palestine and seeing, and I was there in 2017. And I remember being in a number of places, Ramallah and Hebron, particularly with Europeans, and having this conversation about what Europeans were exposed to, as opposed to what Americans were exposed to. And exactly that point being, if Americans knew it was going on here, the support would have, and I think that's the case. And I will watch CNN just to see what they're saying. I don't watch Fox or MSNBC. I see when I'm in the gym, and that's enough, But I will watch CNN every few days to see how they're reporting on it. And even that, it has to come through. The truth of it's coming through, as much as they try and layer it, and as they try and massage it and try and give their own spin on it. The truth of what's occurring there, the truth of a genocide that we are not just enabling, but are completely supporting. And Israel cannot be conducting this genocide without our direct support. The American people are getting, and we're seeing that in the public opinion polls with the numbers who are supportive in a way that 5 years ago we would not have seen.
Right. Mr. Baraka, we just touched on a ceasefire. Something I've noticed on social media, that a lot of times when people use hashtag ceasefire, like even candidates, not green candidates, but other candidates, I don't think they understand that we mean permanently, that we don't mean like a 3-day ceasefire, or to bring in, or a humanitarian pause. Um, what do you think gets lost in that translation? What ideally should we be asking for on top of a ceasefire?
Well, I think I think you're correct that the ceasefire should be a permanent ceasefire, a permanent ceasing of the relentless attack by the Israeli Defense Forces in Gaza. But beyond that, if the U.S. and their Western allies were really serious about creating a situation where we wouldn't have this kind of conflict, then they would get serious about putting significant pressure on Israel uh, to uh, to come to the table and to negotiate a settlement of this ongoing occupation of Palestinians. People sometimes forget that what we have, in fact, is one of the longest occupations in human history. That this population is a population that, unfortunately for Israelis and Israeli settlers, they weren't able to completely eliminate. Unlike the settler project in the U.S., where they were able to reduce the indigenous population to a few percentage points and to confine them to their own concentration camps that we refer to as reservations. The Palestinians still existed and still occupied land that the colonists coveted. And that is the crux of the problem we have right now. That this Netanyahu government, made up of some of the most extremist elements in Israeli society, have always had a plan to complete the Nakba of 1948 and to completely clear out Palestinians from the river to the sea. People forget that it's been a integral part of Zionists, at least the most extremist Zionists, their program, their position to completely take the entire landmass from the river to the sea. And they've said there's all in the documents is public information. So it's kind of interesting and ironic that when democratic forces say that is important that Palestinian people are freed, meaning that the Jewish supremacist state known as Israel is dismantled, so that everyone in that territory can live as free and dignified human beings. That somehow is then equated with some call uh, for Jewish genocide. That's ridiculous. So the situation we face today with the situation in Gaza is one in which if there's going to be a real commitment to human life, the U.S. authorities must at some point put real pressure on the Israelis to come up with a settlement. But unfortunately, again, you're dealing with a government that is made up of fanatics that seem to be bent on completing once and for all the emptying of Gaza and even maybe even the emptying of the West Bank.
Absolutely. Matt, something, and this is kind of, I don't mean to like wax philosophical or something, but something I can't stop thinking about is you look at how Gaza is being decimated, not just, of course, the massacre of innocents, but also as far as architecturally and just how, their land is just, I think we're up to 2 million Palestinians are displaced. Um, so let's say that even if these attacks stop today, which they won't, but let's say even if they do, how do we then are they, I mean, aren't they just, are they really going to be living or just existing at this point? Because even if they survive, they have lost family, they have lost their home, they've lost everything. And that is something I can't stop thinking about, because then what do we do? How can we help? What are we going to help rebuild as Americans? I mean, probably not. Our government is, pretty much responsible for what's happening. So then how you do you know where I'm going? I
Yeah, right.
fear for
If we had a magic wand and we could make all the Israeli bombs and rockets and bullets disappear, and there was no more violence there from this point forward, uh, the catastrophe that the uh, Gazans are going to endure, even without, again, Israel leaves them alone. Basically, that's not, of course, happening, and we're only in the early stages of this. uh, the destruction, the desolation that has occurred is going to last for generations, and it's deliberate, it's consequential, it's systematic. There's a plan behind it, and this is why it is right to call this a genocide, because the idea is to stamp out the Gazans, to get rid of the Gazan problem, as so many as so many serious people in Israeli politics, media, government, the military, society will say, not just people who are mouthing off on Twitter, but people who are in positions of power or proximate to power. This is a deliberate, systemic attempt to end the Gazan problem, as they would describe it. And what that means is kill as many Gazans as possible, but then make the land uninhabitable, make it so that they cannot live there, make it so they have to go into the Sinai, they have to flee by sea, they have to somehow get into Jordan. And the way this has been done is by the destruction of all infrastructure. So this is why you see there's a terror aspect, a terrorism behind attacking hospitals, behind attacking UN facilities such as school that serve as safe zones. There's a terrorism involved in all that, but there's also a practical measure of making it so that the Gazans have nothing here. There's no way to live. Destroy the infrastructure, destroy it so that it's unsafe, it's unhygienic. You can't live here. Disease is here, as well as too. This is why you saw them bombing the bakeries. Make it so these people cannot eat. They have no choice but to flee into the Sinai. Right? I mean, so what we've seen here, and then even too, most recently, I think, with the attack on cultural icons, whether it is poets and artists, teachers, religious leaders, whether it's the attack on institutions such as universities, schools, mosques, churches, certainly landmarks. So stamp out who they are as a people, erase it. And we've seen this because this is the language. We know this is what they're doing because they have said they are doing this. The prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, referred biblically to this, to referring to the Gazans as Amalek. And of course, if you go back, if you go to your Old Testament, if you remember from Sunday school, Amalek were a people that God justified the genocide of, the complete annihilation of, wiping them from existence. And this is how the prime minister has referred to the Gazans. So what we're seeing then are the consequences of that. So even if we had that magic wand and we could stop all this right now, we have still been 2.5 months into that campaign. And so what is there? What is left? I mean, again, I was going to say the most recent thing they've been doing, ostensibly, what they say is to go after the tunnels, is pumping seawater. And maybe that does work against the tunnels. I assume it probably would. But the bigger point of it is it contaminates the drinking water. It contaminates the aquifer. And that doesn't just destroy the drinking water, it then destroys the ground for agricultural use. So you can't even grow anything there. You're salting the earth, which again is another biblical form of genocide. So yeah, what we're seeing here is we certainly have seen things occurring, whether it was in Yemen, whether it was in Sudan, that was, certainly in Africa, in Rwanda, what occurred in the Balkans, that were acts of genocide. But we have never seen it played out like this so deliberately, in real time on our devices, on our screens, with the complete support of the American government.
That's what's so incredible about this situation, in that it is so upfront and in your face.
Yeah.
And the result has been that people do feel helpless. You feel almost complicit. That you've been watching, you're looking out your window, you're watching someone being assaulted, and there's no one to call. And all you can do, either close the window or just, continue to watch. And that is what's happening right now. And it really, it I don't think the authorities, I don't think the ruling elements understand the impact that this is having. There will be no reversal of the prestige lost by the United States government.
Right.
They have allowed this right-wing government in Israel to pull them into the gutter. We were saying earlier about what was different about this conflict, and I was referring to the fact that the way it was covered. I think that even the media was surprised by the scale of the brutality. They thought they were going to cover up that the story would be the heroic IDF going back in and targeting so-called Hamas in retaliation to October the 7th. They didn't realize that the real plan was basically to engage in what Matt correctly characterized as a state terrorism, an attempt to terrorize the population into leaving that territory. And once it started, it appeared that it couldn't be stopped. And the result has been that the people around the world have been horrified by this. And the institutions, the United Nations, are going to suffer terribly as a consequence of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, as a fellow activist, I know, well, Mr. Baraka as well, we all know what activist fatigue is. We get there where we're like, okay, I need a mental health break. I am in those streets every day. This is exhausting. But we have not seen that. And it's amazing. It's beautiful. Every single day there are protests in every country and in every state. It's so beautiful. And to be honest, I've said on my show a million times, this isn't going to happen in my lifetime. Nothing's going to get people off their ass. It's not going to happen. And it's been so moving to see. It's a shame it took this, but it really has been beautiful to watch everyone just stand up and fight. So what is, as an activist, when you watch the way there has been not just hashtags solidarity like on Twitter, but real solidarity between Jews and Arabs and Muslims and, everyone collectively, and just marching together and protesting together for humanity?
I think there has been the events I have been at, I've seen a diversity that is inspiring, as you were saying, but there's also a lot of groups absent. And so I see a lot of groups that had shown up for previous protests, previous movements, previous mobilizations, who are not there now. And I'll say particularly, I've noticed, say, an absence of Unitarian Universalists at these events. And I may not be being fair, but I tend to see it tends to be those that reliably vote Democratic, who were there for the Black Lives Matter movement, who have been there for other mobilizations, particularly during the Trump era, but are not here now because there is such a tie to the Democratic Party, to the White House, to Joe Biden. And I think there's a breakage in that. I think that is that certainly the Democrats are losing more and more people every day because of this, rightfully. But I do notice that there are some groups that are absent that I've seen at these things. I haven't seen who I would expect to see because I had seen them at similar events in the past. But to your point, Joy, you know, when I was up in Washington, D.C. for the big national march last month, 300,000 people, I've never been a part of anything like that. But the diversity, the just the sheer number of different groups that were there was just really awesome. I mean, awesome in the real sense of inspiring awe, right? And so I think as the horror of this, the weight of it is weighing on all of us. And then we make it worse because we say, well, you know, why do I feel bad about this? Why do I feel like this is heavy? I'm not the one dying. I'm not the one suffering. I'm not the one who I have Palestinian friends who have lost 20, 30, 40 family members. Right. So where do I get off feeling any type of desperation or frustration or feeling tired? So that we add that on to what we're going through. And the reality is this is difficult. This is really difficult. It's really hard to watch this, particularly the frustration, and particularly the way that we have to sit and watch this smug lying coming from the White House, coming from the Pentagon, from the State Department, oftentimes echoed by those in the media. And we have to deal with that. We have to accept that to a degree. So this is very difficult, but the alternative is not to fight against it. And I don't think, I don't think any of us have that ability in us to really turn away from it.
I totally agree as far as like that being energized more so now than ever. It's even as someone who's organized dozens of actions. It's, last Sunday, I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and last Sunday it was literally a torrential downpour, and we were marching to our governor's office, and we stayed out there in the pouring rain protesting for over 4 hours. It was freezing. I thought I was going to get pneumonia. I didn't. It was pretty grueling, but all of us stayed. There were at least 1,000 of us, and we just kept going. And that energy is so evident all over. Mr. Baraka, having been, an activist for so many decades, is there something you notice about the energy now that is different with other anti-war protests or anti-imperialism protests?
I think the level of intensity and the demographics are quite different. You have with the entry into the struggle of young people, of students, of youth. This is very, very significant. It reminds me of the Vietnam years, that when the students took the lead in opposing the conflict, that really ended up being the beginning of the end for that conflict, and it had an impact on the social change movement in general. And I think that we're going to see something very similar happen here. That while the spark is Palestine, and the resistance and the solidarity, and as you both were saying, the solidarity is such that people feel compelled to stay in the streets because of the graphic nature of the brutality that we are witnessing. It's difficult you can't forget it. It's I talk to people all the time, and one of the things that there seems to be a common story is people having difficulty even sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You were saying earlier how, you say you don't want to look at stuff, and I mean, the only way I survive is I actually don't look at everything. I mean, I see a story and I know where it's getting ready to go, and I have to move on because you could be overwhelmed. And I know what it feels
Yeah.
like to be overwhelmed as a human rights activist. You know, when I worked for Amnesty International, every day was a day full of atrocities. You know, and it can wear on your spirit. So you have to find ways to protect yourself. So no, no. So this is very, very different. And the trigger is Palestine, but I think that we're going to see a more invigorated social change movement in this country as a consequence. The kind of pivot that I was hoping was going to happen during the George Floyd uprising,
Yeah.
the pivot away from just this focus on so-called racial justice and criminal justice reform to a more radical position in terms of making the connections between the ongoing repression that some communities are facing and the feeling of angst, the feeling that none of our lives really matter. That was animating much of the people who were coming out in protest. Everybody, people felt like as a consequence of the economic contradictions, you know, and the feeling and the way in which your bosses were relating to you, and the precarity that people were experiencing. People felt like all of our you know, we had a knees on our neck, all of us, you know, and so that shift into to a broader sort of perspective and a broader understanding of these various connections didn't really occur. Uh, and there's very reasons for that. One of them being that the ruling element understood the danger of what they were facing, and positioned some groups to be the leader of this thing that they had nothing to do with, and they corrupted the process with all that money, and then you know the thing petered out. But this time, I don't see that happening because there is a real radicalization taking place with these young folks. And I think that with this upcoming election and with the real possibility, the real certainty that the economic situation is not going to improve, this country is facing a very, very significant set of circumstances that can really lead to either radical positive change or the consolidation of fascism.
Absolutely. Matt, on the note of the election, you know, we talk a lot, pretty much all activists, and especially online, we talk about voting, activism, both. What do you think is most effective in this time? Should we still say, yes, let's vote green, let's go hard, and but still get in the streets and protest, or do you think it's one or the other? Like we're in a time when people feel absolutely defeated, and they're like, I don't even want to vote. So do you want to kind of, you know, speak to that?
I think it has to be everything. You know, it has to be all. We have to look at this as an entire body of appendages or organs or options, if you will. We have to be as robust as possible. And some of us will specialize or have more of a role in one than the other. But it's not possible to take on this Leviathan without a comprehensive approach towards it. So it is not electoralism versus activism. It's both. But at the same time, too, there are other elements as well that have to be involved. Certainly, organizing, movement building. In the sense that what we have seen then as well too from labor. So anyone who didn't watch what the UAW just did, and I'm very excited about it as well as I'm sure everyone else. The fact that the UAW is speaking out on Palestine, right? I mean, the way they're talking about not just about Palestine, but talking about empire and imperialism in the military-industrial complex as a whole, right? I mean, something that we would not have expected. We hadn't seen from the labor movement in I don't know how long. I mean,
Yeah.
decades and decades and decades. So that
1930s.
right, yeah. I mean, like I'm trying to right. I mean, so But then there's other things as well, and one of them, to me, maybe the most important, Joy, is this right here. This type of education, this type of information, this communication, this coordination, this mobilization through the technology we have now that allows us to do this, that has informed people, that has educated people, that is the reason why, despite the best efforts of government propaganda and corporate media narrative, about 70% of Americans support a ceasefire in Gaza. It's because of this type of technology and the people who are utilizing it. And so this ability to share information, to communicate, to organize, this is what's so important to me. And this is what gives me hope, because it is really transforming our society, but also too generations younger than us. I'm 50, so I'm Gen X. The generations
I'm Gen X
younger.
too.
Yeah, right. So in our generation, we graduated high school and college just as this stuff was coming out. So it's been with us and we've seen the evolution of it, but it's not, we are not it's not as much a part of us as, say, I guess, if you're Gen Z or millennial but anyway, the utilization of it, and what that then means in terms of having a public that is so much better informed, much more aware, and also empathetic. I mean, how can you not be empathetic when you see these videos every day? You're watching another child being operated on. I mean, just the things that we have every day. We see things that we hope to God we never see again, and then we see it the next day. And so, how can you not have that empathy as well as the anger and the desire to do something and to stop it? And that's what we're seeing. That's motivating this movement, that's motivating these demonstrations, these rallies, these protests, these actions, but also too, I think, to Ajamu's point, is really making it so that that pivot that he was talking about can occur. And so I am at a time where it's the idea of optimism as we watch this genocide occur, coupled with the absolute senseless slaughter of hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine for no purpose, a proxy war for the expansion of NATO, basically, along with all the other things we've come through in these last decades since the end of the Cold War. I am optimistic that we have the opportunity to put an end to that type of to really put an end to the American empire.
If I could jump in real quick on that last point, I think that one of the unintended consequences of the Gaza situation, as it relates to Ukraine, is that many of the people who are in the streets in opposition to the slaughter in Gaza were in support of the Ukrainian war efforts. But as a consequence of them understanding what is happening in Gaza, it has resulted in a more critical reevaluation, if you will, of what was being told to them about the reasons for the Ukrainian proxy war, as we say it. And so the support for that conflict, what I call Biden's war, has also eroded significantly. Mm-hmm. So this is what I'm referring to as this radicalization. And as people are reevaluating these situations within the foreign policy arena, they also are experiencing the contradictions in their own lives economically and socially. People are starting to see the connection between this commitment to militarism by the U.S. government and the violence that is all around them in their own communities, in their own states. The society we live in a society in which it's been normalized now to have over 500 mass shootings. So they're beginning to make a connection between the way in which violence is rationalized in the form of war and the kinds of human beings that are engaged in in violence in their society and the kind of human beings that can justify the violence of war also. So, you have to be morally consistent. And I think people are recognizing that and raising serious questions about the morality of their own society. And that's a good thing.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. I gave you guys a 45-minute time and we're there. I mean, I could talk to you guys for hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. But Mr. Baraka, I gotta ask you two things that people will absolutely freak out if I don't ask you. Number one, if Jill asks, will you be VP?
Well, I think that, of course, I'm supporting Jill. There's no question about that. But right now, my efforts, my attention is on building out the Black Alliance of Peace. It's really important to have the kind of independent voice that we have with that formation, and by extension, helping to revive, if you will, the anti-war movement in the U.S. So that work is very, very important, and have being on the campaign trail before. Excuse me. Understand the commitment that it requires, and Jill has the stamina and the fire in the belly to do this. I don't think that I have the same thing. I think that she needs someone who can match her level of intensity. And so I'm going to help, with that process if she in fact wins the nomination. But I don't think that that's going to be a role that I'm going to play here in 2024.
Disappointing. I know a lot of people are disappointed right now, but I understand. The other question people were demanding I ask is, would you be supportive if Jill and Cornell ran as a ticket?
Well, I mean, who could really be opposed to that? I mean, that would be a very dynamic situation, dynamic ticket. It would help to electrify the country, unify the left. So yes, that would be something very, very important. I don't know if that is if that can happen. Um, I'm hoping that there could be some degree of reconciliation. Um, you know, but I think that the effort right now is for folks to help to get Jill on the ballots across the country. That's the focus. Um, because you can't be in opposition if you're not on the ballot. And so I
Right.
think I'm quite sure that that is their main focus right now. I think that in terms of the issues, there's not that much of a difference between the two candidates. But when push comes to shove, if we are really serious about um, uh, abandoning the duopoly, then if we're going to support a candidate, we have to support the candidate that's going to be on the ballot.
Mhm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
not just on a national level, but on the various other levels, subnational levels. So this is about a struggle for power. It's about building structures that will be sustained even beyond the election, because this is, these next few years in the U.S. will be in fact critical. I'm not going to say what I usually say in terms of predicting what may happen, but it's going to be very difficult. And I'm concerned, as many people know, if you read my writings or my tweets and everything else, I'm concerned about the growing fascism in this country. It's always been a fascistic element here in this process, but I'm concerned about the moves being made by the element that controls the state, that has merged with the state, and that is the neoliberal corporate sector, the financial sector, the real rulers of this country, that, in my opinion, are the real driving force of fascism. It is that element that's been driving the attempts to try to undermine free speech in this country, that have criminalized opposition to some of the foreign policy initiatives of the state. they're the ones that are engaged in this new McCarthyism. So you can be looking at the Trump forces, and some of them are very dangerous, no question about that. But Trump, in my opinion, has been a marvelous diversion and excuse for the strengthening of the repressive apparatus under the control of the neoliberal right wing. These are the fascists. These are the corporate sector that's controlling the state. And I'm really concerned that people are not focused on this immediate threat.
Absolutely. You always nail it. Matt, is there something you'd like to leave our audience with?
No, I mean,
Oh, also, and where they can find you.
Oh, well, thanks. Excuse me. So you can, I'm on Twitter, Matthew Piho, P as in Patrick, last name spelled H-O-H. And then my organization, Eisenhower Media Network, is just Google that, Eisenhower Media Network, and that will come up in terms of what we're doing. But yeah, I mean, just, I'm not sure how I could follow up what Ajamu just said there with any type of, but this idea, though, that what we were up against, and just, every day you're reading things that just so many people in this country are suffering. It's getting worse. It's getting harder. 150 million people living paycheck to paycheck. Yet the media, the politicians, the sycophants on Twitter will say what a great economy it is. How many people every year, more and more people are faced with, I need to check my bank account before I call my kid's doctor. These types of things. We just had the numbers come out on homelessness, 12% rise in homelessness. 65,000 more Americans are homeless this year than last year. At the same time, we see the decisions, the choices being made. And anyone who thinks that ultimately, in order to get that $65 billion for Ukraine that the White House wants, they won't concede. They won't go along with the Republicans' border policies. They won't go along with that state-sanctioned cruelty, that crime against humanity that's taken place on the border. So this is all culminating. And at the same time, we didn't even touch on the climate crisis. Here in my state, North Carolina, they just approved the extension of the Mountain Valley Pipeline. It's going to come about 70 miles into North Carolina. And again, that's something this White House could have stopped, and they chose to move it forward. So I think Ajamu's points about it's this neoliberal establishment, the financialization policies that have gone on for decades that have brought us to this point. And, and I'm supporting Jill as well, but I will, quote Dr. West, where he says, we in America are living at the intersection of might makes right and greed is good. And that's what we're dealing with here. And I think that's exactly what fascism is. Might makes right along with greed is good. And so what we're up against, it's not hyperbolic to say, it's not exaggerative to say life or death, because it is life or death for so many Americans and for so many millions and millions of people overseas.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please smash the like, the subscribe, and share. Also, please check out the 12-hour East Palestine, Ohio fundraiser we did Saturday. We raised $6,550 for the families with children in East Palestine. Next month, unfortunately, is 1 year. So I will be going back again, bringing more U-Hauls of mutual aid. So definitely keep an eye on that coming out. And I'll be doing more updates. Unfortunately, some of the people you've had on my you've seen on my show are very sick because of the toxins, and some are still bathing in bottled water. So we're definitely going to be having some more people back to talk about the state of things. In East Palestine. So, gentlemen, I want to leave you with one question, and it's just like a one-word answer or a few-word answer. Matt, Is the power of the people stronger than the people in power?
It comes down to will. I think it really comes down to will, but I think it can be.
And Mr. Baraka?
I would say always that when people understand their potential power collectively, there's nothing that the rulers can do about that. And that's when you make historical change.
Ooh, I'm making that my ringtone. I just got goosebumps. Well, thank you both so much, gentlemen. Mr. Baraka, it was a true honor. Thank you both so much. And have a great night and a great holiday.
Thank you.
Happy holidays and Merry Christmas.
You too.
Yes. And Matt, we're gonna follow up. It's something I want to catch up with you, talk about.
Absolutely, of course. Anytime.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, all.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Joy.
Oh my God, I was so nervous.
Oh, he's wonderful, isn't he? Isn't he
He
wonderful?
is. He's so intimidating though, because like he's so smart. Like he's so smart.
Oh yeah.
I don't like freak out when I meet so-called famous people or anything like at all, but I'm still on the air.
That's all right.
I'm gonna cut that. But